presentation.
Uh,
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate it. We'll give people like 1 more minute, 2 more minutes to join. But it is going to be recorded, and I will be sharing this recording with everyone else that couldn't attend. I do want to introduce you guys to Margaret Campos and Jake Foreman. You guys probably met them. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves, NMCC, what you guys do, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I've had the pleasure to work with many of you all on the call. My name is Henry Jake Foreman. I work at New Mexico Community Capital, and I'm really excited to share, that we've taken a little hiatus in terms of working with native farmers in particular, um, due to funding challenges. We'll just put that out there. But we are hoping to fundraise to create new programs for farmers in the future. And so we would love to keep you all posted. We're hoping to host a gathering at our space sometime this summer, to just hear how we could best support you all. We know that funding is always an issue. I was served on the advisory committee for the New Mexico Healthy Food Financing Fund this past year. I learned a lot. And I also, have been able to connect with folks through our Business Marketing Essentials program. We did have a native farm in residence program, and we're hoping to revamp an idea around that. So please let us know if you're interested or learning more. If there's anything that we could best support you all. So we have a space, our Resilience Hub, had hosted people. We're going to have a first Friday coming up, June 5th. And we created our last training on that same day, June 5th, in person. So that's going to be a Friday. Margaret's going to be there in person. We're still going to have it virtual, but please feel free to come. We'll have some food and some refreshments as well. So we'd love to connect with you all in person June 5th. But we're so grateful for AIBE's collaboration and partnership. So thank you, Hashim. And of course, Margaret, I love working with Margaret because she really practices what she preaches. And that's really hard to find as an accountant, but also as a farmer. So she has firsthand experience on what that takes. I've been able to visit and actually camp out at her farm. And I really hope you open it up again, Margaret, because it's a beautiful place to camp. It's on the way up through Taos, right at Embula Station. We camp by the river. It's a beautiful river you have, beautiful facilities. So with that, I would love to pass it to Margaret. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please share some wisdom with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to share all that I know. Just so you guys know, if ever you have questions, you can always get a hold of me. And I like helping farmers and ranchers and actually just entrepreneurs. To me, the farmer is one of the most has to be one of the most learned entrepreneurs out there. You're agronomists, you're engineers, plumbers, sometimes electricians. The vast amount of knowledge that you need is kind of overwhelming, I think, sometimes, especially for new farmers. So if I can bring some of my experience and my skill set with finances, I'm more than happy to do that. By the way, if you guys have trouble hearing me, just like give me a little hands up over here and let me know. I'm going to jump into my PowerPoint presentation. I use it more as a way to guide and remind me of the things that I want to tell you. But please, by all means, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions along the way. Or if you care to, just go ahead and hold them off for the end. Can everybody see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, so this is finances for success. Of course, we don't want failure, but I'm going to tell you that failure is not really failure. Don't ever think of it that way. It's just a really good lesson, and embrace it and move on. Okay, but I do like beginning with the end in mind, and that comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. If you ever want a good read, I would say read that. It inspired me all the way. I have this slide here because Jake always talks about our ancestors every time we have a group. And I like to bring my ancestors and my family into it. And kind of, this is my introduction of who I am. That fruit stand is on Highway 68, or it used to be between Taos and Espanola. And that was my first experience selling produce. That's my grandma on the left in the blue, and my tia Loisa over there on the right. That lady happened to not like me because when I came around, I could actually speak English. I was bilingual from the beginning, and I think I took away sales. But that's where my son also learned to was farmers market, and this picture is of my whole family with my grandma and my kids when they were little. That little girl in my arms is now a captain in the army, and she's 28 years old. So old photo. Let's move on. Okay, so let's begin with the end in mind. I up there when I say tomorrow, it's not tomorrow. I really mean next week. But I like to set you guys up for what we're going to learn in this class, not just today, but what we're going to talk about next week. Next week is all about being the master of your universe. When I say setting you up for success, the most important thing that I can share with you today is that power is knowledge. And really, if you guys are going to be successful in business, you have to know more about your business than anybody else. You have to be the master of your universe. Next week, we'll talk about why do we want to bother with financials? Okay, so I'm going to use the word that most people really hate. It's called bookkeeping because it's so boring. It really is boring stuff. But I'm going to tell you what. The analogy that I could bring up, because I do farm, is that when you line up the bookkeeping is like the seed. Okay, bad seed, nothing comes out. Wrong thing comes out. If you use good seed, it's fresh seed. You get good plants, and you know what to expect. If you do your bookkeeping right, you can expect that you're going to be able to set your pricing with confidence, because you'll know what your profit margins are, and you're going to do your homework to know what your competition says your pricing should be, or the range. You're also going to know what your target profit should be. What does that mean, target profit? Well, you got to know exactly how much revenue you need to be able to cover your costs, and how much money do we want to make? How much do we need? And people might say, well, I don't have a choice. I'm going to make what I can. You do have a choice. You need to begin with the end in mind and know exactly what you're trying to make so that you can cover your costs throughout the whole year. We're going to work on that next week. Next week, we're going to talk about some tools about how to manage cash flow. It becomes really important for farmers and ranchers because of the seasonality. We can have an idea that we're going to make a certain amount of money, but if you don't do your homework and you don't set that money, you don't save that money the previous season, you won't have the cash in the fall, in the spring, to get started with what you're doing, which is why planning is so important, because of the seasonality and knowing your crops. And so with farmers, the farm and the farm work intertwines very closely with financials. It's actually that way with every business, but it's so critical for farming because we don't have the kind of margins, we don't make that kind of money, and we need that kind of reserve every year to be able to start next year again. So it's important to know our resources, people, overhead, infrastructure, and markets. Budgeting is critical, not just for your farm, but for yourself. And most importantly, that farm plan. But we'll talk about that next week, because today I'm going to concentrate on the external. Okay, so all of that was the internal things, that why you do your financials, why you want to do your bookkeeping and know what your numbers are for the internal reasons. Today, I'm going to talk about the external things like grants. And you might think, well, why does anybody need to know my financials if I'm going to write a grant? Believe it or not, there's funders out there that will ask you. I've worked with I also do grant writing, and I've had foundations want to see a nonprofit's financials for the previous 3 years, like a loan would. They also want to know, sometimes they want to allow you to apply for overhead. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's important to know what these things are and prepare by having good bookkeeping and knowing what your ratios are. You also need a whole slew of stuff when you go to apply for money, capital, access to capital. Loans require a whole slew of information that I'm going to cover today. Compliance, I put it in red because that's a big red scary one. Filing your taxes on time, being prepared for audits, Gross receipts tax. You might say, we don't pay gross receipts tax, but we'll talk about when sometimes you do. Income taxes, what kind is that? And most importantly, your tax basis. Um, the tax basis is what the IRS uses to calculate what you owe at the end of the year. I like to find as many deductions as possible so we minimize, reduce that tax basis as far as we can, because what? We don't want to owe the IRS at the end of the year. So we'll cover all of this and I'll keep going. Let's see, next screen. Okay, so grants. Grants.gov. Right now there's a grant in there. Is that a hand up? Because I'm in a different screen and it's, how will I see that? Will I see if a hand comes up when I'm in the middle of the slide presentation?
Yeah, so you can see us on the top right. So
Okay, but see, I'm in the slide, so I don't see the hand. I just heard the bell. Valerie, you had a question.
like I raised my hand. Can you see it right
Oh,
here?
you raised your hand. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I didn't.
Okay, it wasn't you. I was
So,
Hashim.
Margaret,
Go.
this is a look. That's it. So if you see that, then someone raised their hand.
Okay, I it just didn't show when I was in the slide.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that noise that you heard, that's just someone entering the Zoom room. So we have a few people that entered.
Oh, okay. Okay. So let me
You're
go
good.
back. Okay, let me go back to my screen. Ah. Okay, well, that was a mistake. Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so let's talk about overhead. Oh, what is overhead? Overhead is the stuff that you spend whether you're doing anything or not. You still pay a light bill, you pay insurance, you pay property taxes, you pay for permits and fees. Whether you show up at farmers market or not, sometimes they want you to pay for your permanent space. That's an overhead. It's something that you costs that come in the door every day, a mortgage, a car payment. Sometimes it's personal and sometimes it's business, but you need to be able to segregate all these costs, and that's where bookkeeping and software really comes in handy. I have a template that I've worked with people on to do Excel, and I'm going to tell you it's okay if you're running a hobby type business, but the minute you start being serious about your business and really wanting to look at numbers and where you're at, I really recommend that you use a software that's capable of doing that. We'll talk about that one later. But if you do go in and apply, like say grants.gov, there, if it's a US federal grant, they will sometimes allow you to charge for 15% of your overhead. So that just means that whatever grant you're applying for, if you're applying for 100,000, 15% of that can be for overhead to cover the lights, utilities, insurance, and that is sure a big help. So if you're applying for 100,000 and you get 15,000, keep the lights on, big help, right? Okay, so the direct costs you can apply for in a grant or would be seed, irrigation costs, labor, equipment. And the thing about when you write a grant and you say I'm going to do all these things, what you say you're going to do are the deliverables. Okay, sometimes a grant funder, they don't care. I got a grant one time from the Lore Foundation. All they wanted me to do was write a report. They didn't even want to see my receipts. But then I've applied for federal grants where they actually wanted to see copies of your I actually applied for a farm loan one time and they wanted to see all my receipts. Sometimes when you're applying for a grant, they'll want you to report by deliverable. Software helps you do that. Um, but anyway, that's why bookkeeping is important, because if you use the proper software, you can tag an expense. So when you put it into your chart of accounts, and these are things that we're going to cover in a little bit, but you can tag it so that you can run a report and know exactly how much money you made came in from the grant and how much you spent against it. And you don't have to spend hours and hours compiling things later. The software will run a report for you. That's why I'm a big proponent of people that are getting into business to actually take your bookkeeping serious and use the tool the way it's intended. The analogy that I used one time, somebody told me they were doing their books in Excel And I'm like, that's great when you're first getting started. I'm all for that. But, you can dig a hole with a stick. I know I can dig a hole with a stick, but a shovel was actually engineered and designed to help me do it quicker. Software is designed and engineered to help you do it quicker than just throwing it into something that can accumulate costs for you. It's created to help you manage reports, because that's the real thing. Is if you put things into a bucket and it's all sorted out, the real benefit is being able to run reports to look at things down the line. Okay, so let's talk about access to capital. Why do we need bookkeeping? Well, these guys, trust me, you're not going to get a loan unless you can provide some information. There are some people that I know will provide loans, and usually, you know, it's going to be a very small loan, and they'll provide it, just you can on your signature. Like the bank will give you a signature loan, would just go in there and based on your credit score. Okay. Everybody should know what their credit score is. Keep an eye on it. You definitely don't want people borrowing money in your name. There's a lot of credit fraud these days. You should know your credit score, and especially if you have a business, because you just never know when something's going to go wrong. I've had pumps. My pumps cost $2,000. Sometimes I have $2,000 in the bank, but if it's the middle of January, I probably don't have $2,000 sitting in my bank to go replace the pump. You need access to loans, and it's not. How can I put this? I went to my banker one time and she said, Margaret, why do you always act like you're embarrassed to come in and borrow money? And I said, because I hate to ask for anything. And she reminded me that, by the way, I wouldn't be in business if you didn't come in and ask for money. The bank is in the business of lending money and you pay them back. So go in and borrow money when you need to, because it actually benefits you in the long run, because it improves your credit score and you have money available during emergencies. Now, that's not to say, I'm not going to say don't save, but you want to be able to borrow. And when you do, the things that they're going to ask you for is a profit and loss for 3 years. Now, if it's a new business, we just got started, that's okay. They're going to want to, you can provide projections, but you got to be able to estimate what you're going to be able to do, put it down in numbers. You need to provide something that's quantifiable, and they can show that you've done the homework, due diligence, know what things cost, how many you're going to need them, the timing, because that's all really important when you're determining your project to go in and borrow the money. Okay, so let's go through this list. Profit and loss, 3 years. A balance sheet. Now, the balance sheet isn't just going to tell them how much money you owe and how much money you have in the bank, but there's a big one in there called inventory. So the more assets you have, the more stable it makes you look. And it's important to keep track of everything, because I've had people that don't put everything into the books. They just do cash, cash in and cash out. But if you're actually booking things properly and you're keeping track of your inventory, that's a really big one to show on your balance sheet. Okay. It's not just the cash sitting in your bank. You should go in there and make sure that all the assets of your business are quantified in your financial statements. The other thing a bank would ask for is 3 months of bank statements. And you might think, well, why are they doing that? Well, they're basically trying to validate that you are making kind of money that you say you're making. So the bank statements is a way to do that. The other thing they'll ask you for is tax returns. I've had sometimes when I go in and borrow money, and 1 year of my past year's tax returns are enough, and I've had them ask me for 3 years. And then we talked about projections. So you're going to need some kind of foretell, project the kind of revenues that you're going to make in the future and justify why you need the money. So with that, you're going to need estimates to tell them how you're going to spend the money, what the loan proceeds are going to use for. But the big one is your cash flow statement. Okay. What kind of money do I think I'm going to have coming in, and how is it going to go out? For farmers, the big one, if you're just, and ranching, if you're on a seasonal, you've got those gaps in the wintertime when maybe you don't make as much money. You want to make sure that you can show that you're going to build a reserve sufficient enough to make those loan payments. But the most important one I can't emphasize enough is know your credit score. The credit score runs between 500 to 800 points. If you're somewhere around the area of 650, 680, you can get money anywhere. From there on up, you're golden. But sometimes if you're below 640, what they do, they'll lend you money, but the interest rate will be pretty crazy. So it's important to make sure that you know what that credit score is. And that's why it's really, really important to make your payments on time. I can't emphasize that enough. If you have credit card balances, make sure you keep the balances low. The banks and people lending you money like to see those credit card somewhere around no higher than like 37%. So try to keep those balances low. The other thing that you need to show is a return on investment. And this is really important if you're trying to borrow, like to build a building or something like that. The bank wants to know that you're going to make enough money, not just to pay the loan back, but that you're going to make money. Whenever we get money, it's not to go out and have a good time and buy a new car and go on vacation. It's to reinvest in your revenue stream. Whatever it is that makes you money, whether you get the grant or the loan, you make sure that you put that money back into whatever it is that's going to make you money in the future to be able to pay it. And that sounds very I know that sounds like I'm almost talking down to people when I say that, but I'm appalled sometimes. I have, and I'm not saying you guys, but I have worked with people that just didn't understand that. I worked because I do consult people on a regular basis. I worked with people that got tons of money, sold a house or whatever, and 3 years later they have nothing to show for it. And with the expectations that they're going to run a farm, but they just mismanaged it. They paid people too much, and they were not looking at downstream to say, well, what is this going to make me? If I'm spending $1 today, is it going to make me $1 tomorrow? It really should be making me $2 or $3 tomorrow. But if I'm spending $1 today and it's not going to ever come back, then I really need to stop and look at what I'm doing and go back and work on my plan. The other one that, believe it or not, I've had loans and it was important to them to see my resume. They wanted to see my qualifications. And basically the bank's just trying to say, look, we're giving you a whole bunch of money. We want to make sure that you are capable of managing it and paying us back. So they look at all of these things. And I would say that the amount of documentation is going to be commensurate with the amount of money that you're borrowing. Very little money, very little paper. A lot of money, a lot of paper. And that goes to tax returns. So I want to talk about that briefly because that's in the next section for compliance. But we're talking about banks' tax returns here when we go borrow money. If you're a single business, a single person, you're probably going to file a 1040. If you're a sole proprietorship. I put single, but I meant sole proprietorship. I was thinking single yesterday. I don't know what that was about. Anyway, 1040, even if you have an LLC, you're going to file it under your, you're going to file for your 1040 for the LLC under the 1040. And that sounds kind of confusing. And people are like, well, how do I do that? Well, it's because you have your schedules. Remember, you have a Schedule F or you have a Schedule C, and I'll show you that in a minute. And in there is where you would, for the LLC, you'll use a different EIN number than your Social Security. If you're doing a 1040 and you're a single proprietorship, you use your Social Security even for your business. The differentiation there is in the EIN that you use or Social Security. Now, if you're a partnership And I definitely recommend an LLC for that. And why do I recommend an LLC? I recommend an LLC because people that go into partnerships, I don't care if it's your best friend or who it is, you should have an exit. Okay. What happens? You go into business with a friend and something unfortunate happens to your best friend, and now you're in partnership with their new partner, their new husband, new wife, and you don't get along with that person. Okay. So that kind of, there should be language in there that the agreement dissolves when your partner, passes, or there should be an exit, some way to get out of this. Partnership agreements are very, very important. It helps to know, begin with the end in mind. Okay, so corporation, you file that through an 1120, Form 1120. But I recommend definitely, if you're going to be a corporation, that's great, but you understand the requirements of a corporation and an LLC. You keep your money separate. Actually, I recommend that for your farm or your business, a different, completely separate bank account. These days with Nusenda and the credit unions, they do allow you to set up business accounts and they don't charge fees. Back in the day, to have 3 different business bank accounts could be anywhere as much as $100 a month if you get charged $35 a month for each account. But I definitely recommend setting up separate bank accounts. But most importantly, if you have an LLC or a corporation, because there's what we call, what is that called? Oh gosh, the corporate veil. You don't want to puncture the corporate veil, is what they call that. And what does that mean? It's just that you commingled your funds. When you're a corporation, you're a separate entity under the law. It's like another human being. They have their own EIN. They function separately. That means if somebody sues your corporation, they can't attach your personal assets. They can't take your farm, your house, because they sued you over something. It belongs to, the suit is to the corporation and separate from you. However, if you start commingling your funds and you run your corporation and all the assets through your personal bank account, you just punctured that corporate veil and you're no longer separate and you're now vulnerable. So especially when you have an LLC and a corporation, it's really important to get a separate bank account. The other one that you might run across and you guys might decide to set up is a nonprofit. Now, some people don't understand that you can actually make a profit with a nonprofit. It just means that your profits have to go back into the corporation, and there's a limit in how much profit you can make. It's usually enough that I think it covers like 6 months of the following year. Trust me, we're not making that much on the farm. I wouldn't, if you decide to go the nonprofit way, it opens up the door to funding, but it's also a big pain in the butt, because now you have, instead of like a 1040 with a Schedule F, that's only 2 forms. You possibly do, like, your personal tax return would be maybe 3 forms, 4 forms. A nonprofit can run anywhere up to 38 pages. And if you're dealing with donations, then you have to deal with in kind. The rules get kind of crazy to do it, but you might need a little bit of help when it comes time to doing your taxes. And that's where it gets expensive, because guess what? If you have a nonprofit or even a corporation, you can have a accountant, you can have a bookkeeper do your books, and the accountant, the CPA, do your taxes. But every CPA I've ever been to, they want to first audit your books before your taxes, because they want to make sure that you did your work properly and you validated it. I actually had a CPA that didn't require the audit before he did my taxes, but everyone I've talked to says we got to do the audit. If you're a corporation, you have no need to do an audit. But if you're a nonprofit in the state of New Mexico, they require an audit once a year. And that gets pricey. It can be anywhere from $4,000 to upwards of $10,000 for an audit. As a if you're making $500,000, and the thing is not everybody requires audits. There's rules depending on how much money you make. But if you ever have that issue, we can talk about it when we get there. Okay, so I talked about the third reason that we need to do, and this is the big one. I didn't put it in red here, but the reason I have compliance in red is because it can get very expensive if you don't do things when you're supposed to. If, for example, you're a corporation, and I can tell you from personal experience, remember I said earlier about, when you mess up, it's the experience is the best teacher. It's definitely the best teacher. I filed my corporate taxes late one year. I did not realize that the corporate taxes are due March 15th and not April 15th. That's the other thing. They're due on different time. It's not like April 15th. Everybody thinks that's tax day. Well, not if you're a corporation or you're a nonprofit. I went to go file my corporate taxes on tax day and I was a month too late. So the IRS sent me a penalty of $1,260. I will never forget that amount. All I can say is if you do run into an occasion where you owe the IRS, don't be shy. Get on the phone and call them. Tears do work. If you get somebody on there that's just difficult, they're clearly having a bad day. Well, I say by all means, you have to be very respectful of these folks. They got to deal with a lot of issues, a lot of people in distress. But if you get someone that's just having a bad day, say, excuse me, but I don't have all my paperwork together. Let me call you back. Call back until you get somebody that's nice or seems like they have an empathetic ear. And if nothing else, maybe you can get a partial waiver of interest and penalties, or maybe I'll completely make it go away. I didn't know this when I was in business for when I did this for my corporation, for my farm. I just paid it. But subsequently, I was working with some accountants and they told me, oh gosh, don't pay those. Call them. I was an executive director somewhere and I called and they just made them go away. I wish I had known that sooner. Okay. IRS, they're the big scary guys. If you don't pay them, by the way, the one thing that they do not play is payroll taxes. If you ever pay people and you have withholding that you kept from their check, their Social Security, their Medicare, that is not your money. The IRS holds you that in the highest fiduciary care, meaning you took money out of somebody's paycheck and you're holding it in care until you pay it to the IRS on their behalf, and you file reports to say where this money gets credited to whom, because that is that person's money and they're going to get some of it back, hopefully when they file a tax return, or someday when they go to retire, they're going to be able to get Social Security and Medicare benefits. So you want to make sure that you do these on a timely basis because it's where the penalties and the interest rack up the quickest. Okay, so we talked about the year-end tax reporting. I showed you the whole list of forms. I'd say definitely if you haven't already gone in there and researched them for due dates, I don't know what kind of organizational structure you have, but you can always call and ask questions. So here's the other thing, tricky, what do you call it? QuickBooks. So I use QuickBooks for my clients. The one thing I don't like about QuickBooks is they keep trying to get more and more expensive. They now require you to set up for the higher tier software, the second tier, and sign up for payroll taxes because your contractors need a 1099. You can actually do it on the basic, and if you ever have that issue, we can talk about that on Wednesday. But your contractors, if you hire somebody that you're paying payroll, we all know what payroll is. You pay them weekly, biweekly, monthly. Contractors, you pay for the services. A lot of people want to try to pay their employees as contractors so that they don't have to do withholding, but there's a rule. And I'm not saying you will get audited, but you should at least know the rule. so that if you're doing it the wrong way, you can at least try to figure out what your story is. Okay. Okay. So payroll is if I'm doing, I hire a person, they come to my farm, I pay them, $20 an hour. I line up all the tools and I say, this is what I need you to do today. And then tomorrow I have them go do something else. And the third day else. That's an employee. A contractor is somebody that comes in with their own tools and I say, there's my whole orchard. What are you going to charge me? And they say, oh, I'm going to charge you, $50 a tree to prune it. They're doing the work by scope, by piece. They are not an employee. And now an employee works hourly and they don't have a specific scope. They do whatever I tell them. Why is this important? Because if you have an employee and you're just paying them on a contract basis, you should be withholding from their paychecks and Social Security and everything that comes with that. But if you just decide to pay them lump sum and treat them as a contractor, you still have to send out a 1099 at the end of the year. Okay. It's a 1099 NEC. 1099 miscellaneous is for something altogether different, but contract labor is 1099 NEC. I think that's the last three letters. Not I think, I know. Okay, so I'm going to move on to state taxes. Geez, gross receipts is the big one. Okay, farmers, you don't pay gross receipts. Okay, so first of all, the farmer doesn't pay the gross receipts tax. The customer pays the gross receipts tax. Again, we only hold that dollars amount in trust. We collect it from the person, the customer paying, and then we pay it to the state. Now, if you're a farmer and you're a rancher, all agricultural products do not require that you pay gross sales tax. So you don't have to charge your customers sales tax for hay or anything you grow on the farm. And guess what? Fortunately for us, we don't need to do it for any products that we generate. So if you're dehydrating your chili and it's now a processed food, it's still derived from your agricultural business and you're not required to pay sales tax. I say, I don't care, still go get that CRS number. Why do you need the CRS number? Because then you can go into the New Mexico TAP and you generate a tax exempt certificate. What does that mean, Margaret? Okay, so the bad thing about farmers or the old adage is that we always buy retail and we sell it wholesale. What does that mean? It means that I go over there at Country Farm and I go buy my seed, and Mr. Country Farm taxes on my sales tax, and I'm paying a retail price instead of going to whoever sells wholesale lump bulk seed or bulk amounts at a discounted rate, and I give them my tax exempt certificate and I don't pay sales tax. Okay, you shouldn't be paying sales tax for things that you are buying for the farm. The only people that pay sales tax are the people that actually consume the product, and you're not consuming it. You're buying the seed to make a product to sell to the customer, and they're going to consume it. So they should pay the sales tax, except we don't pay sales tax on agricultural products. But if you're buying tires for your tractor, you probably don't need to. Well, no, tires for the tractor, you might have to. I think it would be things like soil amendments and actually, no, sales tax for the tractor for the tires. You should be able to go Walmart, file your tax exempt certificate and not pay it. Okay. Another one. I really want to get to payroll and withholding, because I'm talking to a bunch of folks that are tribal members, okay? And we have this misunderstanding that we don't have to pay state withholding if you're a tribal member. A lot of us have had that misunderstanding, and I finally, CJ with New Mexico Community Capital, we spent a little bit of time discussing this and doing some research, and what the answer is if, let's say, you're Navajo Nation and you're working on on the Navajo Nation, you don't have to pay withholding tax. But if I'm, let's say I'm Navajo and I'm working in Albuquerque, I have to pay withholding tax. So if your business is located on the tribe that you are a member of, you don't have to pay state withholding, and your employees don't have to pay state withholding, assuming they belong to the same tribe that you do. But let's say your business is in Taos and you hire people from Laguna, you do have to pay withholding on that salary. Okay, so it gets a little bit complicated, but it just means that if I'm on my land, my tribal land, I don't have to pay gross withholding. I hope that's clear for everybody, because it was really confusing for us for a minute. Okay, there's another really quick thing that you need to do. Oh my goodness. If you do have employees, you have to pay them in the state of New Mexico 12 hours a year for sick leave. Well, you think that'd be real simple. No, because you now have to accumulate how many hours they worked for you, hence the need for a payroll accounting system, because you're going to prorate those 12 hours based on the amount of what a full-time equivalent is in your business. So full-time equivalent is normally 2,080 hours, but let's say somebody only works 60% for me. I now only need to give them 7 hours of sick leave instead of 12. Anyway, you need the software. Let's just put it that way. Workman's comp. You can't really get workman's comp in the state of New Mexico for a farm. That's the unfortunate thing. But I definitely recommend that people understand that when they come to work for you. Here's the other thing: unemployment. I have federal unemployment there, but I didn't even list state unemployment, because as a farmer, you're not really required to cover unemployment because these are seasonal jobs. And I would say that even if you hire somebody on a full-time basis, have them understand that it's going to be seasonal and you could get laid off at any point, because that exempts you from having to pay unemployment. And most of us don't, it is seasonal and you can't really support that full-time effort anyway. Okay, I threw in audits there because when you have your financials, you just never know when you're going to get audited. Usually the IRS doesn't come in and audit everybody completely in your complete set of books. I definitely recommend keeping all your financials for, I think it's for the farm. You need to, for your income tax, I keep 3 to 5 years. I actually have them going back 20 years. And I'm not going to lie, there's been times that I've had to go out and pull up my tax returns. If you sell a house and you're trying to calculate basis, there's a whole bunch of other reasons. I'd say hold on. Maybe not 20 years, but a few years so you can refer to them. Usually they will do spot audits though. I've had where the state of New Mexico came back and asked me, they wanted to see, what was it? Something about a tax return that I submitted, and they had a question, but they didn't ask for, 12 years of financials. They just wanted to see, I think they wanted to see an invoice or something. The IRS will do that. They'll spot audit you on just, some kind of form that you needed information on. Okay. Some funders will require that you have your audits compliant with the state Department of Office of State Auditors, state of New Mexico. Okay, on this, I did put the URL of where we found the information about the gross receipts, and I'll make my PowerPoint available to Hashim so he can share it with you guys. Okay, so the reason I pulled this up, I can't zoom on this one. Can I zoom? Can I zoom? No. How do I zoom? Okay.
I think
these are the
Zoom.
Okay. I don't know. Can you see this? Maybe you zoom on your screen. I'm going to point to the area here. I like to use this to show people that right here, all of this are the categories that we use. This is basically your chart of accounts. Because when you set up your bookkeeping system, your chart of accounts is all, what I call them is the buckets where we throw expenses into. Most important thing you want to do is throw your expenses into that bucket and track every single expenditure that you can. I don't recommend making a chart of accounts that's a million items. I'd say consolidate it so that into these buckets over here. They've got supplies, they've got seed. If you're a farmer, they've got fuel expenses, all the things that you normally spend your money on, but you want to keep track of everything so you can fill out these forms at the end of the year. You can use a software for your taxes. You can do something free. I like H&R Block. If you're using a software that works with your bookkeeping software, they'll even talk to each other, which is even better. You don't have to fat finger things and there's room for error there. But what I really wanted to get you to, okay, so you're going to get this spreadsheet and I have those URLs there so that when you go to make your payments, sign up for EFTPS so you can do it electronically. I can't tell you how many times, like I'm not a procrastinator, I'm just a very busy person. And I'm up at that deadline and I'm like, holy smokes, I'm gonna have to run to the post office. If you're set up electronically, you can submit your stuff on time. And by the way, when you set up electronically, they usually, like for your taxes, they even give you extra time. They say, okay, everybody submit your reports by the 15th of April. But if you do it digitally, I think they give you another 2 weeks because they know that they're going to get it that much quicker. Anyway, payroll reporting and compliance, because not only do you have to collect the money from people's paychecks, you have to report how much of it was Social Security, how much was it Medicare, and what was withholding. Okay, but this is the most important reason that we do books is for tax basis. You want to know what you owe the IRS, and in my opinion, is let's owe as little as possible. Okay. So what is your tax basis? You have your revenue minus the allowances. So like, you sell a bunch of bee products and a company goes out of business and they don't pay you, well, or they return them, it depleted you had to write it off, or they returned it and it was damaged. Sometimes things get damaged in transit. That shouldn't be, it should be subtracted from your revenues, okay? The other thing that should be subtracted from your revenues is the cost of goods sold. What is the cost of goods sold? And you should know the difference between cost of goods sold and supplies. Why? We'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, that's for next week. But cost of goods sold is the stuff that you spent to make what you're gonna, let's say I'm making burritos, okay? The cost of goods sold is the cost of the wrapper that I'm gonna wrap it in, the cost of the beans, the cost of the tortilla and the cheese, but it doesn't include the cost of my gas to drive over there or the cost of the, like the household cleaner to wash the sink. So it's the cost of goods sold is the cost of the product that you made. Okay, so when you subtract all these things out, you get net revenue. Okay, net revenue minus expenses is your profit. That's what gets taxed. That's what you pay taxes on, your profit. So most people will talk about being successful in business and they focus on the revenue. How am I going to make more money? How am I going to make more money? Well, guess what? That's not how you're going to be successful. The way you're going to be successful is knowing what these things are all the way through and maximizing your revenues and minimizing your costs. So minimize your costs means that if I'm running my pumps, I now put timers so that they turn off automatically and my water, watering the whole highway. There's things that you do in your everyday life to try to minimize costs. But the most important thing that you can do is keep track of all your expenses so that you can reduce that tax basis. Make sure you track everything. So I'm giving you a little list of things that you can itemize. And this is on your personal taxes, but it's going to bear, I don't even know why I threw this on your personal taxes. I should have done it the other way. Okay. Itemize your mortgage interest, property taxes, child credit, medical expenses, charitable contributions, American Opportunity Tax, student loan, self-employment health insurance premiums, tax, solar credits, and office credits. The one thing that I want you to realize, though, is back to expenses over here, is that because I'm looking at the time and I'm about to give it over to you guys. I'm about perfect on time. I can't even believe it. Is that track every expense. Even if you go somewhere later on and you find out, oh, I can't deduct that, it's better to, disallow it when you talk to your tax person than to not track it later on. I go through and, in fact, I'm set up like when I go to Lowe's, I put in my email address every single time. Why? Because I am notorious for losing pieces of paper. I lose pieces of paper everywhere. I love the fact that now I have the ability to take pictures of my invoices. I can share it on my phone and I email it to myself. Over there at Lowe's, they send me the invoice into my email, and then I go through once a month and I make sure that I move everything over to the folder, because not everything goes through my bank accounts. I do happen to spend a credit card or a cash payment, and you want to make sure that you track everything. Okay, so when I say tomorrow, I'm talking about next week. But next week, we're going to be able to look at your business at a glance and be able to read financials and know what you're doing and why it means. Because the truth is that you're going to be financially successful when you are the master of your universe. So I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to stop my share. And you guys are going to, I'm here to answer questions if I went too fast on some of this, because I know I did. It was a lot, wasn't it? I hope it's what you were hoping to get.
Thank you, Margaret. That was awesome.
Anybody have any questions?
So if anyone has any questions, they can either ask it here or put it in the chat. This is recorded, and I will be sharing the recording and the presentation, and maybe you can ask questions next week.
What's our email? Margaret at nmcc.org, right? Okay, I just put it in there. Send me an email too if you have any questions. And also, I'm going to be with you next week. So, if you're like out there working on the tractor, and that's usually when my thoughts come, like when I'm weeding or whatever, and you can always save the question. And I mistyped the email. I knew it. I forgot the ACAP. Okay. I'm available for questions next week as well.
Awesome.
And next week will be a little bit, I think, slower paced, because now it's just a lot of requirements.
Great.
Hey, Kayla,
I always learn something. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
I saw Kayla unmute. I don't know if she was going to ask a question or not.
Okay.
This is Stephanie too from Public Creations. I'm not necessarily a farmer, but this information really helped me as well, as I'm trying to get my books going for our enterprise, our collective enterprise. So it's dealing with a lot of other artists selling their artwork. So trying to do the line items on QuickBooks. That's what I've really struggled with. And I kind of closed out my account because I didn't really understand it or know how to put it in place. Even though I'm not a farmer, is that something that you could help me with?
Oh, definitely. And that's how come on June 5th, we're going to have 2 hours, and that's going to be more computer lab. I want to, and we'll be online as well, so you can follow along. But I want to be able to, when you leave, to be more comfortable with QuickBooks. It used to be a lot more straightforward. These days, the online versions, I get confused myself. I like the desktop, but I won't complain. But yeah, it can get a little bit crazy, but it's a really good tool.
Yeah, I
And
tried it and I was paying monthly for it, and because I didn't understand it, I just kind of closed it out. And now I need it. I really need it because everything I'm doing right now is manual recording.
yeah,
Handwriting everything in, but I know that there's that software that will really help my business get these records in place, and yeah, more accurate record keeping, because like you
Great.
said, the reports, balance sheets, profit and loss statements, I need those, but it's like, okay, help me get to the recording part, I guess, with a
Yep.
software program.
Bring your records, bring your computer, come in and get ready to work in person June 5th, Friday, 12 to 2. We'll have food. Yeah, so bring all of that. Margaret's going to be there. We'll have other staff in person there ready to support. Thank you for joining, Stephanie. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
All right. Well, until next week, we'll see you all soon. Have a good day, everybody. All right. Awesome.
Margaret, thank you so much, Jake. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. It was great.
Cool. Nice to see everyone. Hey, Warren. See you later. Come in person, everybody. I hope to see you all.
On
All
June
right. I'm gonna
5th.
hop off. Thanks, Margaret.
I'm sorry we got cut off there. But yeah, is she still with us?
She's
No.
we're good,
Okay.
Margaret. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.
So
All
we'll
right.
be
Well, thank you guys.
we'll be 10 minutes before the next class. Thank you, Hashim.
Margaret,
Okay.
please share the presentation, and I'll send an email out, and I'll include you in it. I'll CC
Okay.
you. Thank you so much
Okay.
again. Thank you.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you
Thank you
guys.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.